Hello, welcome back. I am Mr. Dennis, your art instructor for today. Today we are going to be making a video about how to draw the human nose. The human nose always gives people problems. There's lots of tips and tricks to how to draw it better, how to be more observant about it. And this will continue the series of videos that we have about how to draw the features of the human face. So let's jump right in. All right, first thing that we're going to cover and talk about is making sure that we have good reference photos. So I have picked out a bunch of reference photos. They have great facial features in general, but especially have great noses. We're going to go ahead and jump to, we're going to go with that one. That one shows the nostrils. So does this one too. I'm going to avoid, at least on the first one, doing a photo where the nostrils are really hidden, because I want those to kind of be a landmark in the drawing. So we're going to draw this nose to start with. We're going to go through a lot of the same tips and tricks that we did in the past. So one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I fold this down. I want to focus on just this nose. So I'm going to fold this photo down to where I'm able to focus just on this area right here. Now I'm not going to fold it down too much because I still want to draw it in context as well. So I'm going to leave some of the surrounding area because I'm going to draw that as well. The next thing I'm going to do that I talked about in one of the past videos is I am going to flip this upside down. I'm going to actually do this drawing of this nose while it's like this. The main reason that I'm going to do that is I want to eliminate thinking so much about the nose. I want to look at just the shapes and the shading and the highlights and location of things. So by flipping it upside down, I'm going to trick my brain a little bit into just seeing it for what it really is, which is really just a collection of ink on a piece of paper. And if I copy the shapes of that ink, the right shades, I'm going to get something that looks a heck of a lot like that nose. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started on this. I'm going to start with big basic shapes. We talked about that in one of the last videos. Big basic shapes are really important. So these nostrils right here, I'm going to start with those. I'm going to try to do my drawing a little bit bigger than the original photo, but I'm going to get the landmark of those first. So this is this nostril. Now the nostril has some thickness. It's not just like right up against it. It actually has some space. I'm going to lay my lines out really lightly as well, because there's some times where there shouldn't be an actual line. There should be an edge. If I look at right here, there's an edge for the shadow. There's not necessarily a line. There's a place where the shade stops and then starts a new shade. So I need to map out where that is. Okay? I talk a lot about mapping things out first because that's a really effective way to get things in the right place. Map it out first. I'm going to map out this highlight right here. I blurred my vision a little bit without even thinking because I do this a lot. And I saw that bright highlight, so I'm going to map that out. I'm mapping it out really lightly. Next, I'm going to start to map out this part right here, this nostril. This nostril is a little bit smaller. Part of it is it's on the far side. Part of it is that it's receiving a lot more light. I can tell my light's coming from this way on this nose. One of the things that I always like to look at is I start to become a little bit of a forensic person, and I start to analyze like what kind of lighting were they using in this? Was it direct light? Was it multiple lighting? Was it a diffused light? And as you get more and more observant, which is a really important thing to do, you'll start to be able to recognize some of that stuff too. I'm going to start to map out where some of these dark areas are. I see a triangle right here. Okay, there's a triangle right there that I'm going to map out. There's some highlights right here that I'm going to have to make sure that I keep. There's a little bit of shadow right here. This wraps kind of up into it. If I look, it wraps into it, and then it kind of meets this part. So I got to make sure that I get that in there. Once I get enough of this mapped out, there's also some highlights up here. This nose actually has a little bit of the effect of the exclamation point, which means there's a highlight right here with a dot. Okay, if I flip that back around, and you blur your vision and look at that highlight, it ends up looking like an exclamation point. That happens in a lot of noses. I think partially because of the lighting that they use for so many of these model shoots. That ends up being the case. There's a little bit of shadow over here. So now I've got a lot of this mapped out. There's some shadow underneath the nose right here that I got to capture. There's all this shadow underneath that I'm going to have to do. Now that I have this mapped out, I'm going to start to go into my shading. I'm going to go ahead and get nostrils shaded in pretty darkly. Now keep in mind, as I shade this, I might go back to one of the tricks where I erase a highlight back in. That one on the nose right there, if it gets blended in too much, I'm going to erase it back in. I'm going to bring it back. I'll shade the whole area and come back to it. There's a little highlight right there that I'm going to see if I can keep right on the edge of the nostril. We're going to see if we can keep that one. I talked about that edge before. Because there's an edge there, I'm going to shade right up to that space. And then I'm going to let it fade off. Okay, because there's not necessarily a line, there's an edge. I'm using a lot of that circularism technique that I talked about in one of the previous videos, where I'm using my pencil in a circular motion to create the shading and blend simultaneously. This triangle gets darker right here. But it blends out. I'm going to start to do some of the light shading that goes around that. I can't have this highlight. If I don't do the light shading around this, I can't have that highlight if I don't do that shading. Now you notice as I talk about a lot of this, I'm not referring to a lot of the parts of the nose because I'm trying not to think of it as one. If I sit there and I think about, oh, I don't want to draw the tip of the nose or the nostril, or if I talk about it like that, then I'm thinking too much of it as a nose still. And I'm going to be less successful because I'm not focused on the shapes and the shading and the highlights and all the things that really are going to make this nose look right. A little bit of shading right there. Change shades right here. Do a little bit of shading right there. Now the nostril has a little bit of shadow that kind of continues out. This nostril blends into the shadow that's underneath the nose, or in this case, since I'm drawing it upside down, top of it. Start to darken up this one right here. This is why I have a map. That way I can kind of tackle an area and then jump to another space, start to get after it too. That one blends in as well, turns into this dark shadow that's underneath. Notice I left a little bit of a highlight right there. I'm going to blend that in a little bit. I'm going to start to come up to the upper part here, blend that all together. Notice how I'm holding my pencil. I'm holding it quite away from the tip. That way I can build up shading really slow. I'm not doing anything too dark too fast. There's a little bit of a line right there I'm going to leave. I'm going to blend a little bit here with my finger. As we get into more advanced drawing techniques, we'll start talking about blending stumps and electric erasers and all those other tools that can even make your drawing more successful. I come up here and start to shade this stuff. I'm going to have to come back and erase my highlights back on my nose, and that's okay. I actually prefer that. Usually makes them look sharper. I'm going to darken up this edge and blend it in a little bit more because I'm noticing that is a need. So a lot of this is just being observant. My eyes are going back and forth a lot. Okay, if my eyes don't do that, this will not look like this nose. And the whole point is to notice what this nose looks like, not just a nose, this nose. There's a big difference in that. I'm noticing there's a little bit more of a dip right here, so I'm going to build that shadow out right there to create that illusion of that dip on both sides, which is a shadow. I'm going to darken this up because it gets darker out here. So all of this I'm building up nice and slow. I don't want to do anything too fast because I don't want to have to just erase away and fix things as I go. If I do the right amount of planning, I don't have to necessarily fix so much. Then I can use my eraser as a drawing tool instead of as a correction tool. All right, we're gonna blend a little bit, and then we're gonna do a little bit of erasing, and then we'll flip this over and see how we did. A little bit of blend. I'm gonna erase this highlight back in. See if I can get it to pop back out. I might have to use a different eraser. And erase up here for this highlight. All right, we're gonna flip this over and see how we did. So if I look at this, it's not an exact copy, but it's not too bad as far as making it look like this nose. There's lots of things that I could refine. I could go back in and touch up. And with more time, I would absolutely do that. I would perfect this thing. But in this case of this demo, this is going to get you a great start to actually being able to draw independently noses on your own. Thanks for watching.